Intimidator, more like Intimigrator than a lot of other roller coasters.
I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster.
Intimidator 305, or I-305 for short, is one of my favorite roller coasters of all time. Located at King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia, this Intamin manufactured coaster has a height of 305 feet, no surprises there, a top speed of 90 miles per hour, a track length of 5,100 feet, and a ride duration of just about 43 seconds from the beginning of the drop to the beginning of the final break. And luckily this is a roller coaster where impressive stats are actually a reflection of an impressive ride experience. I-305 is absolutely amazing for 3 main reasons, the first of which is its speed. Being so low to the ground for a majority of the ride means you are hardly ever losing speed by rising in elevation. This ride is in fact so ridiculously fast that, based on my rough calculations, it has an average speed of 67 miles per hour. Yes, an average speed. That's excluding the lift hill, station, and brake run. The second thing that really impresses me about this coaster is its wild transitions. I-305 is just an insane adrenaline rush from start to finish, with wild whippiness the whole way through, and even the transition into the brake run is wild. And then finally, this ride is just super intense. So intense, as a matter of fact, that the first turn of the coaster had to be reprofiled shortly after opening because people were passing out. There were just too many positive G-forces in this section. But even with that modification, people still gray out here, which graying out means your vision gets a little bit darker and blurry, and it means you are quite close to blacking out. But despite its intensity, this coaster is, however, still quite smooth and comfortable. But to dive a little bit deeper into the specifics of I-305, let's take a quick look at the off-ride experience. I-305 is located in the back left corner of King's Dominion, but you can see it from just about everywhere. This ride looks monstrous, unless you're Javi on the Eiffel Tower seeing it for the first time, somehow being underwhelmed by its stature.
That's an Intimidator over there.
The minimalist supports on the lift hill structure are absolutely breathtaking. It looks like this lift hill and drop are just floating in the air. I just adore the way that this ride looks. And I know some people aren't the biggest fan of the red and yellow colors, but while it may look a tad tacky, the scale of this can help me forgive the color scheme. This coaster offers a minimal bit of theming that is quite similar to Intimidator at Carowinds, as both are themed to famous NASCAR driver Dale Earnhardt, and you can actually see a replica of his car in the plaza area for this attraction. Before getting in line for the ride though, you will need to get a locker. If I remember correctly, it's $5 for an all-day transferable locker, which is probably the way to go. So you can also use it for rides like Flight of Fear and Twisted Timbers, which also require lockers. Heading into the queue line, you will notice that there is unfortunately almost no structure for the queue, at least a majority of the extended queue, which is really unfortunate because the rest of the park has great shade. As far as how long you will have to wait, well, I've heard that this was not the most popular ride in the park because it is quote unquote too intense for most guests, but this seemed to be at least tied for the most popular attraction at the park with Twisted Timbers. It was also not the busiest day at the park as we only had to wait 15 minutes, but I will also give credit to the crew working the ride for getting trains out relatively quickly. I-305 does typically only run one train, but honestly the line did not really require 2 trains. Having one train just made waiting for specific rows significantly lengthier. Speaking of those rows, once you get towards the front of the line, you will have your pick of any of the 16. And you can't go wrong with any of them, even though the train is insanely long with 8 cars. The ride speed is just so fast that the difference in where you're sitting is pretty negligible. That being said, I did feel that the trim brake on the ride affected you less in the front because you are already popping up out of your seat as you're hitting the trim, and you stay out of your seat longer. The only place I really preferred the back was on the first drop. As far as the cars and seats themselves go, they are very similar to Maverick at Cedar Point, and Storm Runner and Fahrenheit at Hershey Park. And I personally think these style of restraints are great. The restraints do go over your shoulders, but they are quite comfy and soft, and I understand that they are necessary to keep your body upright. My favorite thing about these cars, however, is that they have stadium seating. These give you a decent view in every row. Sitting in the back of a car, you can still see over the seat in front of you, but more importantly, you can feel the wind rushing in your face. And this is a perk that makes riding in the second row a really desirable place to sit, because you can bypass that long front row line while still having a near identical experience to the front. But enough blabbering, let's check out the actual on-ride experience and go through the layout of this ride. The coaster starts off with a cable lift, which is an incredibly fast way to get you to that top height of 305 feet, and it does so in roughly just 33 seconds. That is followed by the 85-degree, nearly vertical drop that provides strong floater airtime in every row with mild ejector airtime in the back. Part of the reason the airtime on this drop is so good is because of that cable lift, giving you so much speed going into the drop, so you stay out of your seat for quite some time. Which is great, because some drops that are long like this don't get you out of your seat till you're like halfway down. In addition to all that goodness, this drop lasts forever, so this is a very, very solid first drop. Once you get close to ground level, you enter into that first infamous turn, which is just stupidly intense. It's low to the ground, which may not seem that crazy, but most coasters typically rise up after their first drop. So having a coaster that stays low to the ground maintains incredible speed, and since you are entering a relatively compact turn, you get crazy positive G-forces pushing you down into your seat and pulling the blood out of your head. Most riders are likely to gray out here. Some may even black out. So if that is something that you wish to avoid, clenching your butt cheeks actually helps prevent the blood from rushing out of your head. Seems weird, but it's true. Try it. You then start to rise up a tad before entering into a long, sustained floater airtime hill that I think is quite overlooked just because it is less intense than the rest of the coaster. But it does provide some really solid sustained airtime. This element also helps you come to if you were one of the riders that grayed or blacked out, as the blood that left your head returns to it. You then make your way back down to the ground, and this is where you will stay for the next 20 seconds or so, and you get some good positive G-forces before quickly whipping up into a small hill that provides some pretty good floater airtime. But the thing about this element that I like the most is that you are experiencing lateral forces throwing you to the side while also being lifted up out of your seat. That's followed by more positive G-forces in a low to the ground, incredibly fast-paced turn before heading into the whippiest part of any coaster that I have ever experienced. This transition from being heavily banked to the left to heavily banking to the right is just bonkers. It happens so quickly that if you blink, you will genuinely miss it. Like, it whips you so fast that you actually pop up out of your seat as well as being thrown side to side. This element is just stupidly aggressive. The lateral forces are wild. I absolutely love it. You then lower ever so slightly closer to the ground and transition from turning right to left, and this transition doesn't have any of that crazy whippiness, but that isn't to say that this is still not incredibly exciting. Every part of this ride feels like you are traveling incredibly fast, and this is no exception. The next quick transition from left to right is very whippy yet again, albeit not quite as intense as the whippy moment prior. You continue to pull substantial positive G-forces and experience great speed before rising up into the second large airtime hill. Just like the first large airtime hill, this is a less intense moment of the ride, and this is one of the only moments where you don't feel like you are going so fast that you are going to fly off the track. That being said, you do still experience some good sustained floater airtime, which is always fun. It is also worth mentioning that this is where a trim brake is, which will slow you down a tad, and this slowdown is definitely less noticeable if you have a full train's worth of people. Another thing that makes this trim less intrusive is if you are sitting in the front, because as I mentioned at the top of the video, I do feel like you pop out of your seat while hitting the trim, so you do get to stay out of your seat longer throughout the whole element. The element that follows is a sort of half hill, half turn that provides a nice floating sensation before providing a decently whippy moment to the right. You are then sent into yet another violently whippy transition that can vary greatly in intensity depending on how much that trim brake slowed you down. That's followed by one final forceful turn before you get tossed into the final brakes. And this final transition into the brake run has absolutely no business being as good as it is, and I think it's probably the second whippiest part of the ride. Not only do you get that jolt of lateral G-forces, but you also get some airtime rising up into the element as well. It's definitely just not as prominent because the whip is so aggressive. And that's kind of the case for all the transitions on this ride. Anything that is outside of the whippiness kind of gets overlooked just because how crazy that whip is. Anyway, you hit the brakes, you slow down super fast, and that slowdown can actually be quite intense in and of itself. And this is actually a part of the ride where I feel like having the over-the-shoulder restraints here is good because it prevents riders from getting flung too far forward in their seats. An intense and exciting way to end an overall intense and exciting coaster. But what would I rate i305? I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I really want to give it a 10 out of 10. I feel like it's almost a perfect ride, but I feel like it could just use maybe one more element. It's just a lot punchier in that first half, so I wish there was one more thing post-trim to add a little bit of decoration to the icing on the cake. But in fairness, I don't know that many people could handle much more to this ride, to be honest. But I definitely think that if you like exciting, intense rides, you definitely have to add this to your bucket list. As far as where this coaster ranks, it sits within the top 1.5% of coasters I have been on at number 4 out of 273. I know it's kind of weird that i305 is at number 4, but I did not give it a 10 out of 10. And again, that's just because I do not think that it is truly perfect. But as far as personal enjoyment of the ride goes, I mean, there's pretty much no other coaster I prefer. But I'd love to know what you guys think of Intimidator in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. And make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about